Hello, welcome to a new video from CatLABS. Today we're going to be looking at first impressions of the all-new Intrepid 5x7 camera. We literally got this camera a couple of days ago, but we've already taken it out in the field, given it a good run for its money, and we came up with a couple of conclusions of what we think about it. Let's have a look. Essentially, the design of this camera is the same as any other Intrepid that's currently available, the Mark IV 4x5 and the Mark II 810 with a couple minor differences. It sets up much the same way. Captive screw in the front. Takes a lot of turns to lock this part in. And a slightly new shape of the separate knobs that lock the front tilt and the front rise. And let's put a lens on it so that we can have a good idea of what it looks like. Like all Intrepid cameras, this camera too is very light. It's similar design, it has very cool features. Overall, it offers awesome value for money. We love what Intrepid are doing, but all of this comes at a cost. There's a price to the low cost and basic design, and let's look at a couple of those issues that we came up with just by using this camera over the weekend. There are no zero positions. So the back has no position stop that helps you align it to be a plumb or at 90 degrees with the rest of the camera. The same is true for the front standard. There are no markings on the bed, and there are no other methods of knowing when it is centered or when it's completely level or plane with the back. The same is true for the front tilt. There are no real markers or markings, and there's no position for zero position or center position for the rise movement. One of our chief complaints with the new Intrepid design of the separate lock for the rise and tilt function on the front standard is that these have a high failure rate, and in any case they're not as convenient on the 4x5s. These are kind of annoying. They're extremely complicated to service because of the very complex mechanism that goes into the front standard. And here, these new knobs, they look really cool, but the problem is the outside knob, which locks the rise movement, and the internal knob that locks the tilt movement collide, and there's very few turns, very little margin here, and so they often collide with each other, and it makes it kind of annoying to try and release them. You need two hands on either side, so it's not a convenient thing to do when you're behind the camera. In the past, Intrepid used a single nut to lock both the front rise and front tilt, and we happen to think those were infinitely more convenient than this complex system. Seems to be also a lot more reliable, definitely when you're in the field and you want to be able to control the camera and not worry about tiny little screws that may be spinning free, not enabling you to lock the camera to make that shot. Another thing that came up almost instantly when we started using this camera is that the focus track is really tight at the beginning. It kind of binds. You have to use a lot of force, move the camera around, and then it becomes really smooth at some point, and then again towards the end of the track it becomes really tight and binds. Now, we actually have two of these cameras, and this happens on both of them. Now, as soon as we put this camera on a tripod, we found that the tripod stud from our quick plate collides with the focus screw. Let's have a look at that. I don't know if you can actually see this, but this is our tripod stud that is actually touching the focus screw. And this could be a bit of a problem. Something for Intrepid to think about for a future design. But then the other thing we found is that the metal that makes up the base is not perfectly flat, and the bends here, they're pretty close, but it really means that the front and back standards are never going to be perfectly aligned. They'll be close enough, but they're not going to be perfectly aligned just because of the structural shape of the base. These knobs are locked as tight as I can possibly get them, and I'm going to use 2 hands to load the holder, which is alright. These springs don't look it, but they're very tight. They're really strong, which is a really nice feature. Keeps your holder snug into the camera. But then when you come to remove the holder, the back moves. So you have to really put your hand on the camera to pull the holder out. But even then, it still moves despite the tight lock that I had on there. I'm going to put it back in and try this again. So if I put the holder in, obviously I'm using both hands, that's fine. But even if I'm holding the back with one hand, I still got a little movement on the back here. It definitely happens if you're only using one hand. This camera uses proprietary lens boards, no common standard. The shape is very similar, in size that is, to a Toyo 110mm lens board, but the thickness is different, and Toyo boards have a big rabbit here on the back, which doesn't fit the camera even if you flip them the other way. So you are limited to using Intrepid lens boards. These are plastic, they're cut out of ABS, they're not bad, and it kind of fits nicer than in any other Intrepid camera actually. The lens boards fitment on this camera are better than the 4x5 and 8x10 cameras that we've used. Is that the maximum bellow draw of this camera is quite limited, especially for a camera with a format of 5x7 where you might want to use longer lenses, you might want to get in closer, and it is quite limited in terms of length. This set screw that holds the axle of the rear standard has a tendency to get loose, and it affects the entire function of the camera. I wish they'd put some kind of Loctite or thread lock on it. Intrepid, if you're listening, it's a small feature you might consider adding in the future. So despite all these drawbacks and issues that are relatively minor in what we think is an overall great option for a camera that lets you get into the format of 5x7, relatively low cost, a lot of good features, extremely lightweight, and a camera that can be used, albeit with a lot of work. And again, like with all Intrepid cameras, this one as well requires extra work from the user to set it up, requires extra work from the user to set up the shot, and it leaves less brain power available to make your shots. But that's part of the cost coefficient. You pay really for what you get. So again, we love this camera. A lot of room for improvement on this. Hopefully there'll be a 5x7 Mark II which addresses all these little bitty things, and we'll be happy to see it, and hopefully we can get it soon. In the meanwhile, you can order this setup, which is a brand new 5x7 Intrepid camera with a 180mm Schneider lens, a couple of film holders, some fresh film. We'll leave the link below. You can order it on the website. We have a bunch of these ready to go. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel.